Next on Bright Founders Talk by Temi, join David, the founder of PredictAP, as he shares his inspiring story of launching a startup during the dot-com boom and now maximizing his AI product at PredictAP. Using machine learning, David and his team have discovered a way to optimize the invoicing process and relieve employees of mundane, trivial tasks. In this video, David discusses the payment problem, the difficulty of persuading people to leave the big hitter companies and join the risky journey that is of the startup world, and how the potential of AI will change the world. He says it's time to start building now because technology has finally matured. This episode of Bright Founders Talk is not to be missed. Enjoy. Okay guys, hello and welcome back to Bright Founders Talk from Temi, an international software development company that designs, builds and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Today guys, we've got with us David Stifter, founder at PredictAP. David, hello, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Matt. How are you doing today?
Good morning, good afternoon my side. David, let's get straight into it. I want to know before we get into what you're doing at PredictApp, I want you to let me know what is your role, what you're doing, and a little bit about your background so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, no, it's my background's been in solving problems basically. So my biggest part of my career, the last 17 years, I've been at a large private equity investment firm called Colony Capital. Recently, it shifted focus and its name has changed to Digital Bridge, but leading the business side of technology. So with big investment firms, there's a lot of problems to solve. How do you do reporting for public companies, reporting for investors, reporting internally? How do you move money around, collect money, pay bills, move capital, contributions, distributions? So a lot of challenges around a global investment firm. And my background that kind of led me to that was I was always been a bit of a geek at heart. So I really like technology. And, ever since I was a little kid, loving to geek out and on whatever the latest and greatest things are. But also I've had a background as an accountant. My journey's been a lot of different roles, and I think a lot of careers you kind of find opportunities and you shift around to meet those where there's needs, and I think that's been a real big part. So for me, my first job was in college. I'm a little older, so I was in the dot-com boom, and I had founded one of the founders of a startup. It's actually called College Web Guys, one of the first social media platforms about a decade too early. But so I was in college, I had the startup, I was ready to retire in 2 years, and then the crash happened. So a big wake up call. And so with that, I was scrambling. I was a senior in college. Instead of retiring to Fiji, I was struggling to find a job. So ended up getting a position as a custody fund accountant with a company called Investors Bank and Trust, which is a mutual fund custody. It's a very difficult type of work where it's the lowest of all forms of accounting. I think you're just churning and calculating net asset values every day. And and from there, I wanted to again kind of find opportunity, and the geeky side of me took that job. And I think it's a bit of a lot of people ask career advice and all that stuff, and the biggest thing is always trying to make things better, find the problems and solve them. And so I was one. Yeah, I was one of 1,000 accountants, and we're chugging every day. And so something as small as we had these variable rate security things where we had to go to a Bloomberg terminal and type in these things, and there's 30 minutes you have to do it, and everyone's scrambling to do it. And I figured out a way to make a disk and put it in the machine and pull the rates down and do this automatically. And then went to my bosses and said, hey, we have 1,000 accountants. They're spending 5 minutes a day on this at a critical time. That's thousands of hours. Let me automate more things. And so that's how that kind of business and accounting side, plus the technical side, really started my career of improving processes.
Nice. So you keep on talking there about the geek in you. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What was the geekiest moment of your childhood which you thought, okay, I want to go into this career in the future?
I know the exact moment. So I was I don't know exactly how old I was, but back in the day of computers, back in DOS, to run a game, you had to type the executable, right? Like whatever, Wing Commander, whatever the game was. And I remember there's a game, Defenders of the Crown, I think it was called, and I forgot whatever the code was. You had to type it, right? And so I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, I want to play my game, but I forgot the code, right? And he's like, let me show you dir, which was directory. He's like, look for the one that says exe. And I was like,
Yeah.
for me, it was this moment of, wow, there's this whole, secret world of technology. And that was kind of a moment of saying, hey, I want to understand how these things work. And that was, it's been a lifelong journey of trying to figure out how these things work. And that was definitely the start of it, though.
A lifelong journey, but I guess it's just one of those things that will never be solved, because the amount of technology that comes out and completely advances all the time, that is, you can never learn it. It's something that you have to continuously learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a programmer. I'm not, I have a surface understanding of a lot of things. And I think, as time progressed and as my career changed from an individual contributor to a, leader, where I ended up as a managing director of a large firm, there's a real understanding that you need to change your focus. And for me, it's finding and enabling smart people who know way more than me on specific technical things, right? So there's the transition too of, being able to do things yourself to, hey, I have a pretty good spider sense of competence and people being able to do things, and finding those people and really finding out how to let them, be as successful as you can be. And that's the role, right? Is kind of, shielding them from the bad things, encouraging them, giving them the resources they need to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on, because obviously to find out about your founder journey and kind of what you've learned over the last however many years. Obviously, you've learned so much, and the way things have changed has also taught you to change in your approach of things. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. So first of all, just correct me. So PredictAP or PredictAP?
PredictAP. So it's around accounts payable. So PredictAP.
PredictAP. Okay, tell me, firstly, where did the name come from? Was it something that was quite easy to come up with? And also, tell me a little bit about what you're doing there at PredictAP.
Yeah, so PredictAP came out of my day-to-day role in my background of making technology work at big companies. And so, as I talked about before, there's lots of different problems to solve. And if you just think about a certain part of it, so payments, right? It's every company in the world has to pay bills. It's very common, and there's a lot of different pieces of that puzzle, right? So how do you actually make the payment, right? Do you use a credit card? Do you bill a com? There's this actual payment thing at the end of the process. For most firms in the middle, there's some process about approvals, right? You want to have segregation of duties. You want to have, this electronic workflow around receiving, ingesting, and approving invoices. And so the firm I was at had spent a lot of time working on electronic workflow and approval, getting off of paper onto that. Spent a lot of time around the actual payment side and really automating that. And for a big investment firm, there's, hundreds, it sounds crazy, but there's hundreds of billions of dollars of movement, money coming in and out and all this, hundreds of thousands of payments a year. So you can imagine it's the incredible amount of hours that can go into documentation, approvals, moving money, all that stuff, reconciling and all that. So we had spent, and working with my partner, Trisha, who's the treasurer at Digital Bridge Colony, she and I worked together. And again, I think one big thing of advice is always, really finding good people to work with in the business side and understand, they people who understand the problem inside and out and can really work with you when you're trying to bring technology to bring it. But anyways, we had worked on automating a lot of it, and we still had this fundamental issue of getting it into the flow. And with a lot of investment firms or private equity firms and a lot of just financial firms, it's not as simple when a bill comes in. It's not as simple as saying, hey, I have my personal bill, I pay it on my credit card and I'm done. Usually there's a process of allocating expenses. A little bit goes here, this division and that division, and you push these things down. And there's a real knowledge component of that. It's a real tribal knowledge thing where it's not on an invoice. You may have a FedEx bill and it says, it went to, IBM and it's $50. Well, I can guarantee you the IBM mothership's not paying that, right? It's going to be some department or some deal or something like that. And people just know this. The AP department, it's a very tough job. It's not the most glamorous job, but there's a lot of knowledge they have to have on, oh, okay, the FedEx bill came in, it said Project Excelsior. I know that means this deal or that deal, and I push it down and 50% goes here and 25% goes there to these two things. And the GL accounts, overnight postage, because it was overnight, not regular. So that kind of tribal knowledge was a very difficult thing to solve. And we had been solving it with people, and as time goes on, and as the world changes, part of COVID's issue and all of that is turnover of people, and being able to replace people and get new people in it was quite difficult. And so we had some critical people leave, and we're a huge multi-billion-dollar company. We can't pay a bill because some of the AP staff left. That was a challenge. And so we had been using some existing technology, some OCR scraping, some outsourced labor that can take some things off the invoice itself, but that knowledge-based piece wasn't being addressed. And I saw it as a real hole in this piece of the workflow. And so I went out and looked, and I said, and the idea I had was, well, when we hire a new employee and say, hey, you have to do this, they look at the history of the invoice, they look at the coding. You tell them, figure it out. They make a Post-it note and they say, okay, well, 10% goes here, 20% goes there, all that. So I thought that should be a good use case for AI. That the hard part of AI is really good annotated training data. And every time we paid a bill in the past, we've created good annotated training data. So the thought was, hey, let's use that to accomplish this goal. And I went out and looked. I didn't go out to start a company. I went out to go find the company that's doing this, because it seemed to me like someone should have solved this. And let me tell you, a year later, everyone in the world's doing AI. If you Googled, I Googled AI, accounts payable, everyone in the world's doing it. And as I spent hours and days, on calls with folks, I heard that the dirty little secret is maybe people use AI as a marketing tool and not reality, right? And maybe there's, a little bit of OCR or something in there, but in the reality, they're sending it to India, or they're doing other stuff. Or they're doing a very hard-coded templated approach where, you have a human building these rules one by one. And so a little bit of like, oh, this is unfortunate, like a lot of chaff instead of the wheat. And so after a long time of looking for those solutions and realizing there wasn't one, realizing how common this problem was, and realizing that the tech seemed to be there, the components seemed to be there to accomplish this, I launched a project to try to build a proof of concept to this within the company. So hiring some consultants that had particular expertise with this, laying out for them, hey, here's what we're trying to do, here's the sources of data, really going through for them the nuance of coding these invoices for real estate. It's seems like a simple thing, but it's actually extremely complicated. There's a lot of kind of decision points on this. So going through all that, and ultimately it worked really, really well. So the concept, worked. And at that point, I realized I was onto something. I had talked to a lot of other CTOs and saying, what are you doing to solve this? And everyone's like, well, you can, again, there's a little bit of help with OCR, but really we're throwing bodies at it. When they saw what we had, they're like, oh, this is interesting. Let's go do this. And so, at the time I was at Digital Colony, and I went to them. I was like, guys, we're onto something here. We should go, launch a software company. At the time, they were doing this very big merger with a bunch of companies, and there's a lot going on, and they really didn't want to get involved in that, even though it would have made a lot of sense, but they didn't want to do it. And so, I really wanted to pursue this. So I had a crossroads of, do I want to go pursue this or keep on the path? But we made a great deal where that we were able to launch it. And in reality, this was a big learning point for me, is building kind of a custom on-prem, duct tape and bubblegum solution for a firm is very different than building a SaaS company with these kind of very high levels of security and expectations. That was a different part of it. So it needed a lot of time and a lot of money to make that a real viable product in the market. But that was the thing of looking to myself and saying, this is a real problem. There's not a real solution. Why can't I make a company go address this? And so worked through a deal with my firm, and then wanted to launch a company. And so very specific need, nothing in the market, looks like a good path to solving it. So it's a real world problem and a potential real world solution.
These are some of the best startups that I've spoken to, are the ones that when you're struggling with the problem yourself, you go out to find and solve the problem just because you need it solved, but there's nothing to solve the problem. So then you think, okay, now I've got a reason to start this. I think you said a year, but I just want to confirm, how long did it take you from that moment of, this is not right, I need to solve this, to, okay, I've got it, let's go for it? How long did that take?
So there was 2 steps along the way. So first was, hey, this is a problem. And with that, looking in the market. So that was actually about a year. So that was, and we tried some proof of concepts. We spent a lot of money on it. because again, a lot of people promise a lot of things, and unfortunately, that it didn't. Maybe fortunately for how things worked out for me, but it didn't work out. And then it was, let's do the internal proof of concept, right? This internal custom app. And that was about, I'd say 4 to 6 months to kind of get that internal thing. And there's a lot of shortcuts you can do with a single customer where you can kind of overfit models and things like that for a specific situation. And then from there, after it was in place for a couple months, I realized, that this is a real problem and a great problem. And then it was, let's figure out what it's going to take to actually make this into a company. And I'll say from that point to actually going out and getting customers was about a year. So all the raising the money, getting the, investors, building the SaaS proof of concept, all of that was about a year.
Do you think it's possible to do it quicker, or do you need that kind of time to kind of digest all the information, everything that you're finding?
You can definitely do it faster. So there was choices on how to approach it. And I'm sure there's a real temptation to go quicker. So as a startup, there's some choices you make around, how much money do you raise? How much do you build out your proof of concept and the MVP and all of that? And one of the, I think, looking back, the good choices we made, and it had to deal with our technical staff actually. So it was interesting. We started this firm at the start of COVID, and so it was interesting that we, the mentality was you have to be remote to start, and so that let us pull talent from across the world that we'd worked with before. And so I had some people I had met in my career, and actually Chris, who's our head engineer, he was at Apple. I knew he was unhappy there. And so I was like, hey, you want to do a side hustle for a little bit? And starting that. But we made a decision to properly build out the tech stack, because what we could have done is said, let's build something that looks kind of nice on the surface. Behind the scenes, we'll figure out this coding on our own and kind of have a bit of vaporware. And we would have got to revenue much, much quicker. But that would have cost us down, we would have so much tech debt downstream that it really would have limited our growth and our ability to scale. From the start, we wanted to scale to a large company. And so with that, we decided to spend a full year on building out the tech stack properly, Kubernetes, everything built with a modern tech stack. And that was actually, I think, one of the biggest factors in being able to get good engineering talent. It's quite challenging as a startup to get good talent, because of so much risk. And if people are at Apple or Google or these folks, like they get paid a whole lot of money and very little risk and downside for them. But the fact that they were able to work on a very modern tech stack and what they're working on directly impacts the product was a big thing. And so we took the time. It did allow us to scale very quickly with no major issues. And also we've built in a lot of tooling around, inevitably problems happen, right? So not only building the tech stack right, so we can very quickly, promote new code and add features and all that, but hey, AWS has a hiccup, or, there's an issue or the client's seeing or whatever, all that tooling behind the scenes, really lets us minimize the amount of support staff we need and all of that. So it was an investment of time and money, but, ultimately our goal was to scale to large institutional customers, so that investment really paid off, not only in how the product works, but actually as we continue to recruit engineers. We've been in competitive runnings with really great companies, and we've so far we've kind of gotten everyone we want. So it's been a real help in the engineering staff as well.
I want to talk about this a little bit more in a second, about the team and team building, and obviously finding your engineers, because it's ridiculously difficult at the moment. And as you mentioned, as a startup with not really much behind you, it's really difficult to get them on board for that trust as well. But before we do, talk to me a little bit more about your MVP. How did it look at the beginning? Were you happy with it at the beginning? And did you work on it in-house, or did you have it outsourced?
Yeah, so the MVP, the product itself is not the look and feel of it is pretty straightforward. So it looks like an invoice, and there's fields, the header, who's the vendor, who's the total, and then there's details around who's paying it. So there's not a ton of work around the user experience initially. Now, as time goes on, there's a lot more features and reporting and all that. Really, I think the challenges were around truly properly using the machine learning, right, and getting that to work well. And for us, there's definitely been a always been this discussion around, can we do more quicker with some external help versus keeping it all in-house? And there's a real challenge around both parts of it, because in-house you're committing. We're not going to hire an engineer and then get rid of them in 2 months when his thing's done, right? We're adding a spot. That person's going to be with us forever. So understanding that we're changing our cost structure, and we're finding homes for folks where there may be some discrete products where we just want to get this done, and don't want to make that long-term commitment. But we've had an interesting journey with that, where a lot of it was luck, I'd say, of just connections over the years. And I think that's another big thing, is when it came not only to the engineers but to the initial customers for the MVP. I've always been someone that's kept in touch with people, and in real estate, there's a product called Yardi, which is it's an ERP system. If you're not in real estate, you've probably never heard of it, but it's a huge company, 6,000 employees, $2 billion in revenue. Wow. But it's a very niche thing. It's like, I'm big in Japan, like I'm big in Yardi, So with a lot of people who had left my firm or other places, I've always been in touch with them around, they have challenges or different things, or work through problems, and always kept in touch. And that helped us get some initial customers. But on the engineering side, this strange thing happened where we had connections, like my friend Chris, who actually I went to high school with, and I kept in touch with, and again, knew he was unhappy with it. He started part-time, and then, a few months in, switched to full-time. He knew some people, I knew some other people. My co-founder, Russell, Russell has been great as well. He came in very early with me and started this, and complemented my kind of real estate and tech side of it with he started a number of startups. He's got the Harvard Business School and all those things. And he's got a British accent, which every company needs. So he's got all that, and he knew some people at his last firm and all that. So we actually had an interesting thing where most people we brought in started out as contractors with a specific task. And that let us try them out and let them try us out. And we weren't giving them this ultimatum of, okay, we're a brand new startup, go quick Google and join us, right? It's okay, well, can you do some work? Here's a specific project, let's work through it. And then a few months later, they realize, hey, this company's really onto something interesting. It's an interesting problem. There's something here in the way they're doing it. It's interesting. We've tried to be very mature as far as the insurance and healthcare and benefits, and really punching above our weight as far as how we treat folks. And they see how we operate, and then we see how they operate.
With the kind of the short-term kind of projects, did you do that consciously so people could see what it's like, or was it something that just kind of accidentally happened?
It accidentally happened initially. It was, again, because we wanted to get this MVP where we weren't committing. We didn't raise, I put some money in, my partner put some money in, and we raised a little bit of money from external folks. So we wanted to see, is it a real problem? Will people pay for this problem? Can we solve this problem at scale? And so initially we didn't want anyone to quit their job and join us. And so it started like that. And then we saw how well it worked to not only, show them what we're doing, but us to see how they work and make sure that it's a good, no divas, a good connection of people and all that. So then we consciously said, oh, this is a good way to do it. Let's kind of do that for everyone. And that's pretty much how it's worked.
It's a really good method, I think. Yeah, really good method. So that enables you not to use kind of outsourced companies. You're able to use your references, which you've got, and obviously slowly bring them into the team if they fit. Yeah.
Yeah, actually. And there are some, again, there is certain cases where we use some outsourced folks on, very specific things. But in general, it's been, people who know people. And again, these are all, it's kind of 15 to 20 year kind of vets of this. And for them, I think it's been very exciting this is how they've always wished they could build a tech stack and all of that. So that it's been very organic as far as connections of people versus, people that know people, and then getting a taste and then jumping into the pool.
Tell me a little bit, let's go on to more of the tech side a little bit here. Tell me, what have been the difficulties in employing AI? What have been the difficulties from the beginning and to now? Has it changed much within those couple of years?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we're definitely at a turning point where there's some start to, people have been talking about AI for so long. and it, means so much to so many different people. But, I think we're starting to see applications that are truly taking advantage of it. And so I don't think this company could have been created 5 years ago, where just the, just the OCR piece, companies spent millions on developing OCR engines and getting that kind of initial view in there. And if we had to go back a couple of years and spend $5 million on an OCR build, like that would have been, that would have been tough because there's a lot of competition to that. But, luckily where the market is now, Amazon and Google, they have, Textract and Texaract. I don't know why they call them so similar, but there's kind of commodity offerings around that first pass of gathering information of documents. And then that's where the ML comes in. And so the challenge is definitely big. It's definitely real. I think what I see most in the market is a lot of skepticism about, does this actually work? And I think that's where we've been successful in having a very targeted and narrow focus on real estate invoices. There's a lot of offerings in the market now that kind of use this more generically, and they'll successfully understand what a total is, what an invoice number, what a due date is, things that are more generic broadly. But the devil's in the details when it comes to the nuance of how something's coded, particularly with every industry, right? And so in real estate, there's expense recovery pools, and maybe this building, it's this one and that one, and it's a capital project versus a normal expense. All these different decision points lead to it, and it actually lends itself well to ML, but it's very, very hard to get it to all work right. And so it was, a learning experience, and we'll always be working to get better and better. And so it's challenging, but we know it works, right? And we know we're going to continue to get better. And there's been some choices on what problems we tackle with that, and how we kind of develop that ML learning. Like we have, for example, early on, a lot of our customers are talking about construction invoices, which is a particular kind of subset of it, which are very challenging. It's hundreds of pages, and there's lots of decisions and calculations and a lot of nuance. And we saw ourselves, we could spend 5 years on that and not clear that we could solve it, as opposed to more, hey, 80% of your invoices are this type, let's do a really good job on those. And so there are choices to be made too about how big of a problem you tackle. And that's all discussion with customers and our team on where we think we can get the most bang for our buck in a reasonable amount of time.
Absolutely. Tell me that you're talking about earlier, you were talking about right at the beginning, finding the right people. Yes, you got some good people that you were working with from previous companies, good contacts. How important is that? And would you be where you are now without those contacts? How would you have found kind of this success without those people that you could have relied on at the beginning?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest part of our success, right? So every company has an idea of a problem they want to solve. That's the foundation of it. And with tech companies, you're solving it with technology, right? So the execution of that vision needs a team that can make it a reality. And so there's my role as a founder, which is getting the money, getting the concept, getting the customers, all of that. That's important. Then there's the product side, which is really digging into the problem and making it very clear, what the problem is, what the features are, all of that. So Greg Achenbach's our head of product, and it's funny, Greg and Chris, talking about good people. So Greg had worked with Russell, my partner, before, and Greg's like, I have this great tech guy that I want to bring in. I'd worked with Chris before, and I was like, Chris said, I have this great product guy that I want to bring in, and they started working with each other. Like, oh, they're even better, so they're like product and engineering are like a married couple where they're so they have to be so tightly aligned on how that works and working collaboratively on that. But ultimately, the execution of what we want to achieve is solely based on the people building it. So even if you have the most perfect problem, the most perfect, idea on it, like you have to execute on it. And then there's also, and what I mean by execute, it's not just building the tech solution, right? But it's also the user experience. How do you install it? How do you get it to the customer? How do you get them involved and buying in on it? That's another big challenge. And so, with David Bedard on our customer implementation and success. So that's another technical challenge around, taking it from here's a piece of tech to how do you actually going to integrate it into someone's business? That's actually a huge challenge potentially, where every company's busy and they don't want to have a 6-month project for this. So engineering wise, that's another choice we made on making this extremely easy for the customer. That's another talk about, when we say, oh, how quickly could we've gotten to MVP? We could have made this in a very kind of manual intensive process to get our customers going, where they have to give us extracts and we set up FTPs and all that, as opposed to doing it the right way with APIs and all that. But that enables us now. It takes about 5 minutes for our customer to give us an interface user. We pull that history, it churns in AWS for 5 days, give them an hour of training, and they're good to go. So from a customer's perspective, it's an hour and 30 minutes, which is a huge engineering undertaking, but it removes this huge barrier to going forward, which is, oh, I'm too busy to use your product. Even if it's the most perfect product, perfectly solving the thing, so that's another aspect of how these things work together, right? Great problem, great solution, engineering that actually works, and then, how do we implement it with the customer with minimal effort?
Nice. Dave, tell me there, from our conversation, what would be the one thing or the main things you would like the listeners to take from what is PredictAP?
Yeah, so what we are is, if you think about paying invoice, and our focus is kind of real estate, private equity, finance, but how do you ingest and code those invoices? The very first start of the process, when a vendor sends you an email, are you having your people open an email, drag the attachment down, typing stuff in? We handle all of that automatically. So email comes in, we take the document off, we scan it, when we fully code the invoice and push it to your ERP system. So minimally disruptive, all that work you've built on your downstream process, we handle, we integrate with, and we kind of seamlessly integrates. And then that knowledge intensive piece where we always have to worry about the person that knows it all walking out the door, and you're in a tough spot or retiring or whatever. We bring that we bring technology to secure that, right? So we're augmenting your staff with great tools, so they're not typing 12-digit invoice numbers. They're worried about more value add stuff. I think that's a big part of the market today, and challenges around labor. Like, you don't want your people just chugging away on data entry, right? And just you have 1,000 invoices and you're just typing stuff. You want people focused on are these credits being applied right? Is there an issue here? Is there fraud here, right? And that's a hard thing. If your people are just struggling to get through the volume, like, they're not going to look at that suspicious invoice and notice things if they're just just looking at numbers to enter, right? And so I think it takes away a lot of the manual work, a lot of the that stuff no one really wants to do anyways, and frees up time for them to work on the complicated situations, the problems, and preventionally preventing fraud. I think that's a big thing around invoicing today.
That is what one of the most amazing thing about technology and startups these days is that they're freeing up so much more time for us to be able to get on with other kind of tasks and work and all of these things. So exactly, it gives people the chance to let something else deal with that so they can do something else. Last question, which I have for you. Where do you want PredictAP to be? Let's say in 3 years' time. If we were to have a conversation in 3 years' time, where would you be? What would be different?
Yeah, no, I think we want to continue to expand out our market. Right now, we've got a little over 20 customers. We've started the year with 0 invoices, or maybe 5. I think it's 5,000 invoices being processed. Now our customers process over 1 million. We have 15 employees. Like, it's been a great journey up. I would love to see us continue to expand and have a big portion of that market. And I think there's a lot of other areas where this can be applied. And a few years down the road, I mean, medical billing or other things, there's some options around there, using the core technology or using the data we have to more to help our customers answer other questions, right? So again, I think there's a lot of things we could do around fraud, and a lot of things we do around expense normalization, and trying to spot outliers and problems, and help our customers use their data to make their business run more efficiently.
Nice. A busy future to come then, most definitely. Dave, thank you very much for coming on today. It's been great to speak to you, pick your brain about PredictAP, and know everything about the world of PredictAP as well. Thank you.
Great, Matt. Thank you so much.